Welcome to Classrooms Beyond Borders, a day in the life. I'm your host, Campeche. I'm an educator from Canada, and I know that access to quality education isn't a level playing field. In this podcast, we're going on a journey to explore the realities of schooling in less developed nations. Join me as we explore the real lives of teachers, students, and community leaders in less developed nations and discover how their experiences can challenge and inspire us all. Today, we have the pleasure of being with Gerardo Navarette, and he is from Campeche, Mexico, and that is on the Gulf of Mexico. I've known Gerardo for several years, and we've connected as Google people in that Google sphere. But today we're going to talk about, like we have been, what is basic education like in your part of Mexico, Gerardo? So welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your area, and then really we can dive right into what would schools be like in your city or in the little towns around your city?
Thanks, Camille. I'm really glad to be here with you and allow me to talk about my state and my country. Mexico lives different situations in many areas because we are a really big country with many difference and contrast, and not just talking about persons, but just talking about the geography, the orography, and we have really different ecosystems in our country. So I will talk to you a little about our state that is not the smaller, but is one of the states with less people in their territory. So we have many concentrations in about no more than 11 cities, and we have the most people in urban communities in two cities, Campeche and Ciudad del Carmen. Campeche is the capital city, and Ciudad del Carmen has been a really important city because the petroleum, and it's a really great source of riches in this state. But riches that is not shared with many people because many foreign people in many companies come to Ciudad Carmen and use the petroleum to get riches, but not to share with all the population in this state. So we have two great cities in many towns with so less people that get services with some limitations. But we have to know that our state is to an agriculture source of resources from our countries. We have many towns, very small, maybe 200 people, where the education is not reaching their objectives because there's no way to have resources to build schools in all places. So we have good schools in schools with infrastructures in major cities, major towns in our state. There you can find a reality that is urban schools with buildings, with the facilities to work, and with teachers that live in that site. So this is good because they are part of the community and they contribute with the people that lives there. There are in some towns like this with good schools, but with limitations about technology. So this of Mexico isn't gifted with good connectivity. We have really great problems to use connectivity. When a state that is responsible for most of the actions in education has built schools in small towns, they don't have the enough resource to work completely. For example, I came to Campeche 37 years ago. My first job could be, because it wasn't, could be in a school about 50 miles from the main inside in a train, and we have to get to that school. My wife and I, that were coming several years ago, we have to get to the community. I think that cars with a capacity that 5 tons, because vehicles with less size were crowding the way and couldn't arrive to the community. And the first time that we got the community, we found, after being urban teachers, we find a community without electricity and without good minister of water. There was in the community there was just one well for get water. When we arrived there, I told my wife, this is not what we're expecting. We will find another way to survive, and we are teachers and we can do this in other place. And we were cowards. Don't stay there. And we went back to capital city where we have a house in those times. And we began to work in private schools in the capital city. There's two reality very diverse. And many of our students in those schools live in the community. So when they have intention to study, they must walk. They must go in a horse, or maybe they're going by rivers to get the education in some schools in other communities that have the fortune of have buildings. Maybe not with all facilities.
Gerardo, I just want to make sure to follow you in some of those really tiny little towns, like the one that you didn't stay in. There's so little infrastructure, no electricity, no water, no school, essentially. So those students, if they want to study, they have to go to a larger center by horse, by river, by boat, by walking. How far might a student, like, do they travel there every day and then go home at night, or do they have to find some lodging or boarding and stay in that town and then go home on the weekends? What does that look like?
Yes, and let me tell you, when the state is small, can get and by car from one border to the most far border of the state in about 8 hours. But we can think that some of the students that I am talking to you can take for any kind of transport, maybe 2, 3, 4 hours to get to school. And there are some schools, they have a space to sleep, to be there all week, and sometimes they do that. But many of them just get the community walking or using another way to get there, and they come back because sometimes they have to work in their communities too to get the sustenance, and they are not allowed to stay all the week. That's the worst reality that we have in the state. But many parents make a really great effort to help their children to get to the schools in the communities that are bigger, and the schools are really with every facilities. I have to say that the state have work, and in some communities there are buildings, but small buildings, just 2 rooms. In those communities, I have to say that we have teachers that those are heroes because they work not just with one grade. Maybe in some unitary schools, we have teachers working with students from 6 to 11 years old, and they are working with all grades to making some progress. And really, when the children get 11, 12, migrate to other cities, to other towns, to get secondary school or high school, and in some cases, university.
So, Gerardo, if we took all the kids in Mexico that were students, how many of them would go on to secondary, or at 12 years old, 13 years old, when it's time to go to secondary? Do all students make it that far, or what would the percentage be that would continue at that level?
Well, let me tell you that the last time I reviewed this statistic, I remember it is maybe not recently, but I remember for each one that is student that come to free grade to bachelor, and around 200 students in high school. And if we were growing, maybe we have some millions of people beginning the primary school, and for just one to get a postgraduate course or a doctorate program. Really, the pyramid is impressive because we think that we can give education to our children, all our children, but in reality, it is not a really problem because in other countries, the public school isn't an obligation for the state. But here in Mexico, it's a constitutional right. So we to offer to our children and to our youth all the possibilities to get university education. Because now in our constitution, it says our third article, the education should be obligatory and free to students until university school. So it's a great work for our government, but always, I can repeat, the teachers are the clue for this. They are the key to get education to our children. The number of students that get to a university isn't so good, 100%.
So most finish primary. Do most finish secondary?
95%. Maybe many people just get the primary, but when we go to secondary school, it gets just 80%. And we went to high school, we get only that 60%. And that's a statistic from 2019.
So pretty recent. So Gerardo, you were talking about the schools in the big cities like Campeche. In a typical primary school in Campeche, how many students would there be in a classroom? Would there be 20, 40? What would be typical?
Well, let me tell you that I taught in primary school several years ago, and I had groups from 50 children in my class. But now I think that the media is about 35 and 40 students in the class, public schools. In some private schools, the rule is no more than 25. Really now, my wife is teaching in a school with just 10 students in sixth grade.
And is that a private school?
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
private school.
So significant difference there. So large classes. Let's talk maybe a little bit about the school facility or the school building. Are there large gymnasiums and outdoor facilities? Does everyone have a desk to sit in? That can really vary from lots of places. Tell us a little bit about that, the physical building and the structure of your schools.
Yes, and in urban cities, and the infrastructure depends of the kind of school. There are schools very prestigious in each city, and they have the financing from the government and maybe sometimes from another ONGs that help the schools. A school of this level that have really all facilities that they need. That's not so important in a school. Well, when we think in a gymnasium, in the gym, we have great spaces that some courtyards that have some domes to protect from the sun that is very intense in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And they are used for multiple actions. They are used as theaters, places for events, civic events, and sport events. Just one space for multiple use. And in the case of urban schools, all they have a connectivity to internet, and maybe some of them have computing centers with computers and equipment allowed to our students. But there's not reality in every schools. But many of them, not many, most in cities have them. In the rural buildings, there's nothing of this. In the small communities with their school, the state government has had the initiative of make some spaces like this with area of multiple functions, and they have domos to protect the sun, but they are for the communities and they are used for the schools too. In many of those towns, the school is near to the center of the town, and there's the center of many activities, including activities of the people in that town. And the school perhaps doesn't have the great facilities, but it converts in the center of many activities for the community.
What about resources like books, textbooks? Are those plentiful, hard to come by?
Yeah, part of facilities in these schools with some prestigious, and there have libraries. Yes, there are a small library in the school. And as part of free education in my country, we have the textbooks free. And all the students receive a kit of books for covering their necessities according to the policy in the state. And in some cases, some organizations provide in rural schools of old material that could be necessary for the students. They give notebooks, pencils, and other elements to make work with it. But in German schools, there's no necessary set because people in urban cities, some schools are considered with the range of private schools. I can tell you about one in my city. The principal had made a very good work, and they have a good competence center. They have classes of English, and they have good facilities, gardens, and the space for multiple functions that I mentioned. And it's a good school, and many people make long routes at the beginning of the course trying to get their children in that school. But it's the difference, and it's some of the contrast that we have in our country. And I am talking you about a really small state. But when we're talking about education in Mexico City or Chihuahua or in Guadalajara or in Monterrey, there's a plenty of difference because there are cities and states more rich and with more possibilities to get to other communities. And well, I can tell you about my little state that I love because I am since 7 years ago, and I am Campechano by election. Well, I would like to talk to you about the complexity in the state when we don't have really good infrastructure for technology and cognitive. And I was working 10 years ago in a program to extend the internet to all communities where there were at school. And I was making the study of where we can put the sites and the points of access for these connections. And we got a really sad findings. For example, we assigned a school that we visited, and when we returned to give the equipment, there was no electricity anymore in that community. Or we got the equipment, and when we returned to connect it, there was stolen from someone in the community. So security, facilities, and many other complications made difficult to give some opportunities to our children in our state and obviously in our own country. This is a micro reality from a reality most complicated in a country. But I have to tell you that there's a really good interest for the government to give education, and the community of educators try to do their job too. So I don't like to show a sad scenario of education in Mexico. I want to tell you that we have some complications to get educations to all our children, but with many effort and with the work together of authorities, teachers, communities, family, and of course, conviction of the students that they have to get education to have a better life. I think that we are doing some things interesting. And I don't know if I told you that the children have some complications for the weather.
Okay, tell us more about that.
In urban schools, you can look for schools with conditioned air, and they're fresh and their time of school. But obviously, there are communities where the weather hot sensation is about 45, 50 grades Celsius degree, and it is not so good. In some schools, they begin their activities 7 a.m. morning because they have to stop when the sun is really annoying. And sometimes the problem too is that some of those children have to leave the school and go to work, their families, and the camp and the field activities and help their community to obtain ratings. So weather is something that in not all places plays against the possibilities of students to get good access to that. And there's a challenge for our teachers, of course, help them to get a foot in those times. I know from some really, really heroes in communities that take from their salary to share with their students when they found that doesn't have nothing to eat. And we have a really great heroes in our education in Mexico. I can tell you because I have seen them and I have the opportunity to share with them some experience. So we are using technology, yes, but not in all schools. And we have facilities, yes, but just in a little portion of our schools.
Gerardo, in your city schools, so in Campeche, the city's where there is infrastructure and technology. One of the questions I've been asking is when we think of a teacher, just a regular teacher at that school, would that teacher likely have their own, let's say, a personal computer, a personal laptop that they own? Would that be rare? Often it's rare. Or would they, just rely on their mobile phone? Would that be their internet device and they wouldn't likely have a computer or a laptop? What would that look like?
Well, let me tell you that pandemia was a really great challenge for us at all levels. I just have to say that many teachers put their resources to the service of their students. And when we have to leave all activities at school, many parents made a great sacrifice to get some laptops and some devices for their kids. And you can see that at least in each family, you can find one device. The problem wasn't to have one device. The problem was to share it, because in some schools, the model was, you have to connect daily to the class. Oh, okay. But we just don't notice that many of our students are 3 or 4 children and family, and how they can share the device in the same time. Let me tell you that I was responsible for conduct the program of academic continuity in one university in those times. And one of my first indications to the main authority in the university, the rector, was, please don't transform your model from presential classes to online classes. We have to reduce the number of sessions in the week because many people doesn't have the devices to access all time. Imagine one family with 3 children or 3 students, in my case of high school and university, that have their classes at the same time and they have to connect. That's impossible because one family with 3 children will have to buy 3 devices. And that's not real. So I think that the rate of the computers or devices that are in a school in urban cities, it could reach the 1-to-1. The pandemic pushed us to do that. And I think that maybe the most important action that we have to do, and I am one of the convinced people that try to do the change in this, be through the Google Educator groups or the other organization to give PD to our teachers, is that they have to learn and don't leave the technology just for pandemia. Just have the opportunity to extend their functionality and use the technology for be a good backup for presential activities. In the case of other infrastructure like printers, like robotics, they are really in private schools. In some private schools, there are robotic courses, and the use of printers inside schools is not a regular practice. In schools, they are using electronic devices with digital figures.
We've talked about lots of things. And so one of the things, like most nations, like most countries, a stark difference depending whether you're a city student or a rural student, huge differences in opportunities. It gets harder for kids to attend school as they get older. They have to work in the fields. They have to help out their families. They have to travel farther to the secondary school. And so along the way, you lose children.
Yeah, that's right. But I think that there, in a country and in a state, there are two great situations that we have to grow and we have to learn to do best. I think that the first one is the good creation of policies that make education more inclusive. And of course, the second most important, but not less important than the first, is the budget. And in the last government, budget for education was decreased in benefit of give to the people some other benefits directly economic. And we have now grants for the people that doesn't work. We have grants for the people in the field that doesn't have good results. And we have grants for people more than 65 years. Our country is giving many resources to this. I can say people in disadvantage, but they are not giving the opportunity to education in the budgets to grow. And the third is, I think that the recognition to teachers. Teachers are not a profession that is well paid in Mexico. And I think that we could make a better place for teachers to work and to convince them to work with more efforts in education if we allow them to have a better salary.
So I'm hearing this as a common theme that typically the teacher's salaries compared to other professions is low. If you took a teacher, whether it's in Campeche or a smaller school, what would a teacher's salary be? I don't know if we can put that into like US dollar equivalent. Can you give us a sense of what that might be like compared to either other professions in your country, or if we can convert it to a US dollar amount, what a teacher might make?
I will try to give you an approach. One technical position now, it has a really difference in professions where you are working. Maybe in some places of this country could be more salary, could be bigger. In some places in the country could be less. But in the general side, maybe department chief in government could get about $200 monthly. And teacher who have to attend 30, 40, or 50 students maybe got not more than those $200. And if you think that a professor of university in the low level, they are getting $600. But you can tell that at the same position in Chile is about $1,500. And for the teachers on foot that went to the rural schools, they don't have additional support. But for the transport, for their food, for their coming, they just have to receive just their salary and make the best with that. And it's a great problem because teachers live with the hope of leaving the communities and coming to the cities.
Is that how it is? People's goal is to leave the rural area, the small town, and get to the city because that's where success is and that's where life is easier. Is that how things go?
Yeah, and we have known many teachers that begin in the community, live in the community, make their life in the community, give in the community for many times. There's a great level of rotation because they leave the community and go to the other community until they get the schools and feel good living in a great city. That was the thing that we did. My wife and I doesn't be prepared. We were very young. We have 20 years old, and we weren't be prepared to stay in the community before have grown in Mexico City. The difference was really, really great. So we didn't keep in the community. We are in the capital city, and we have been here for 37 years. But we need teachers that be compromised with keep keeping communities and make grow the communities and adapt their life to the communities. But it could be easier, Cami, if the state give them some compensations, yeah, and say that okay, you need a house. I help you to have your house in the community because you are good for the community. Because you are helping the community, because you're being a really change agent for the community. But there's not much teachers doing that because, of course, they are looking for their economic benefit and maybe for another side to their kids to grow. That's totally comprehensible. But if we have a better management to allow the growth of communities and the permanence of teachers in those communities, maybe. And of course, the budget to the existence of good facilities, a good building, water, and electricity in those communities, because I think that we have to attend all the primary requirements of the population. But that's my politics side. I am a teacher and a consulting, and I love sharing with people what I am doing.
Well, I think in every country, we would always love for there to be more investment in education, build schools, and to invest in teachers. And so that's a pretty common theme. Well, Gerardo, I want to thank you for your time and for your stories. And it's been great to hear how education is so different in Mexico, but yet so the same in so many ways to other places.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm glad to be here again.
You have been listening to Classrooms Beyond Borders. We hope this episode has offered a valuable perspective on education in a part of the world that may be very different from your own. I hope these conversations spark a desire to learn more about the world, to engage with global issues, and to consider how you can contribute to more equitable and just education for all. Check the show notes to see if there is a specific suggestion for supporting the school in this episode. Join us next time for another journey beyond borders to another classroom with another incredible teacher. Subscribe to Classroom Beyond Borders wherever you get your podcasts and on